Today we're going to be talking about how to develop a powerful millionaire mindset.
All right. Well, let's get this thing going for sure. Let's talk about developing a millionaire mindset. So let's get going.
Absolutely. Well, I think you are the perfect person for me to talk to about this in regards to changing your mindset. Let's start first, I think, with reprogramming maybe some of the things that we have from early on in our life, right? I would venture to guess you're very much like me in the sense that you didn't maybe grow up with a household full of money, or I don't know everything about your background, but from what I do know, I think that would be accurate. Would you say?
Yeah. No. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and try to pretend like as if though I was in a position where we were struggling financially. My parents provided with what was the basic bare necessities, but we had to fight for everything. I was buying my own clothes as a young kid. I had to become an entrepreneur just to get the extra T-shirt because I was tired of the hand-me-downs, all that stuff. So it wasn't a poor me type of mentality, but it was pretty close. We were on WIC, we were on welfare, we were on all the government aided programs that you can possibly get on. So yeah.
So it's fair to
Say it again.
say your parents were not millionaires.
That actually my grandfather on my dad's side was actually pretty loaded. But unfortunately, long story short, the inheritance didn't make it to my dad. So so my dad ended up unfortunately having to just fight for his own and trying to make things happen as a non-first generation Hispanic here, in California.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's start there. If someone does maybe come from a place of not having a lot growing up, wasn't surrounded by people that already had that type of a mindset, how can we reverse engineer, or how can we retrain our brain and our emotions and how we think about and how we feel about money? Let's start there.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's there's nature versus nurture. There's the nature part of it. This is who I am. This is my upbringing. This is my lifestyle. I'm used to it, and that's how it was with my friends. The exact same thing. But the nurturing part of it is the seeking and wanting more. And there was something in there, something that God blessed me with that was a little bit different from the rest of my homies, and that was just the desire for wanting more. I think part of it, since the largest part of our audience is realtors, is looking at those goals. What are those things that drive us, motivate us? Those things that just give us that burning desire, and we have to constantly look at our goals in order for that to take place.
So that would start with, I guess, setting goals to begin with, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the goals are very important because here's the one thing, being a coach now for the last 14 years, is there is this big discrepancy between the agents that are sputtering at the bottom, doing, 5, 10, 15 deals a year and wanting to get to that next level. And then the agents that I'm coaching that are doing 100 plus deals a year, doing over $1 million worth of income. And that discrepancy is all about their goals. The agents that are doing high levels of successes, separate from the goals, there's other things that of course have to take place, but they're very clear, and that's 100%. I constantly interview agents, and I talk to these 7-figured agents, and I ask them, share with me a little bit about your goals, and it's bam, 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 bam. And then I go through and I ask somebody who's struggling at that 5, 10, 15 deals a year mark, and I ask them, what is it that you want? Oh man, I don't know. I mean, I just want to, be able to pay my bills, and, I want to go to, a vacation and live a nice life. Okay, what does a nice life mean for you? Well, I just don't want to worry about money. Okay, well, what would you do if you didn't worry about money? What would you buy? Where would you go? I don't know. I really don't know what I want. So there's that discrepancy between the clarity of the agents that are making, 7 figures or doing 100 plus deals type a year, and then the agents that aren't, and they struggle with setting up goals or knowing what they want.
So you mentioned the word clarity and getting
Mm,
crystal clear with the goals, right? So it's
yeah.
one thing, like you mentioned. Well, I want to have some money, and I don't want to worry about money, or I want a nice life. But what you're saying, and what I've found to be true, based
Mm,
off, you know, being around people like you, is that you need to get crystal clear on exactly what you want to accomplish. How do you break that down? How do you
mm,
get clear on your goals? Is it a transaction volume? Is it, a certain amount of transactions? Is it a certain amount of volume? Is it a certain amount of money? What is
yeah.
that? How does someone break that down?
Yeah, that's a great question because that's the part where, okay, coach, you're sitting here talking about having clarity, creating goals. How do I do it? Um, there's success has commonalities. You go and listen to Jim Rohn, you go and listen to Bob Proctor, Mike Ferry, Dale Carnegie, all of these people that have talked about success. And they break it down from a couple of different perspectives. They're all a little bit of a variance, but for the most part, there is the 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year goals. So you have 1 year, 3 year, 5 year goals, and for that matter, even 10 year goals if you want to do the extra credits. You break it down into four primary categories. The first category you're talking about are business goals. And they don't have to be in any specific order, but let's talk about business goals. Business goals are, being the number one agent, doing X number of deals, make X amount of money, having the corner office, having a buyer's agent, building a team, all of the business side of things. The second one is the material. The material are the things that people in most cases have the easiest time with. That's the cars, the houses, the boats, the trips, the all of the other stuff that requires money. The third one is actually the hardest, but it's the most rewarding. And that's personal goals. And the personal goals are things that you have to earn, not buy. You have to earn them. What are things you earn? Well, think of, for example, building a strong personal relationship with your significant other, growing a spiritual relationship, reading X number of books, running a marathon, anything that requires, in a sense, an effort. And those are actually hard to identify, but they're in most cases the most rewarding. And then the fourth item is basically that basically the action steps. So you have business, material, personal, action steps. You do that for 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and even in 10 years. And that's going to provide some of that lack, whereas basically that of course, clarity. One of the things that I've actually recently found out, probably about a year or two ago, is a lot of Asian countries, cultures, they put together these crazy goals of 100, 200, 250, and even 500-year goals. And, I'm sitting here talking to Joe, the realtor, and he's kind of like, I don't know what I want to do this year. you know, so, the big hitters, they're very clear. And that's one of the ways to, in a sense, break it down.
I've heard that. Yeah. I've heard that. I don't know if it's China, but they, one of those countries, or maybe multiple, but the one I believe I heard of was China has a 100-year plan for their
Yeah.
country.
Hmm.
Maybe something we should adopt over here, right? We can't seem to figure out what we're doing over here. But what I'm also hearing is that there's a correlation between your business goals and your personal goals. Maybe let's talk about two different avenues, talking about personal. So you mentioned relationships. Maybe that's with your significant other, or maybe that's just with people that are in your family, your kids, your parents, perhaps.
Yeah.
Also, the second part of that would also be, you mentioned health goals. You mentioned running a marathon. How do these two things correlate to our business? How are they intertwined, so to speak?
I know some people that actually make pretty good money, but they're in the worst shape possible. So they find themselves in a position where they can't even enjoy their wealth. Or I've had the not so good fortune of people that have actually passed, and they've done, they live this over the top, excessive life of the constant steak, the constant lobsters. It's great, all these vacations, but they don't take care of their health and they don't take care of themselves. And this constant, in a sense, battle, living life to the ultimate fullest. There's got to be some version of a balance. But when you create that harmony For example, just going to the gym, how does that actually help us in our business? Well, it does, because it actually releases endorphins, and the endorphins is what keeps us in a ideally good mood, continues to put us in a positive state. And the more positive state we are in when we're prospecting, working on our skills, doing all the activities that we should be doing in real estate, it helps us, because now picking up the phone and calling somebody, you're doing it from a good state instead of a poor mental state. So all of those things kind of, in a sense, tie into each other directly and indirectly.
Makes sense. And I would say, when it comes to our relationships, right? The people that we have to maybe wake up next to, or your kids, or people, maybe you have your parents that live within your own house, you're helping taking care of them. Relationships are poor there. How does that affect our business?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the biggest thing. I mean, I deal with coaching clients all the time where their unfortunate, home life is poor. They're going home. You got the spouses, whether it be husband or wife, it doesn't matter, is asking, "Hey, what time are you coming home? You're always staying so late at work. You never make time for us." Or the most infamous is this is one thing that I learned early on. My babies are now 26 and 28. But how about when you would actually spend time with your family and or your kids, and they'd be watching TV, you'd be on your phone, and you'd be hanging out for an hour, 2 or 3, watching a football game, whatever it is, and like, "Oh yeah, I spend time with my kids, my family all the time," but there's no connection. Everybody's in their own little bubble and or world. So when you have the harmony from that perspective on the personal side, especially with relationships, you're going to have the encouragement. "Hey, honey, don't come home until you actually get an appointment. Hey, honey, you know what? You're gonna kick butt today. You're gonna get another listing." When you have that uplifting, you want to go out there and battle for your loved ones. And when you don't, it's harder. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it is harder when you're sitting there. If you don't have somebody that's rooting for you, cheering you on, it does make things at a challenge at times.
And I would agree with that. As been in this business for a long time, getting your spouse on board or getting your kids on board with what you're, by communicating to them that, hey, when I do X, Y, and Z, right? When I sell 5 homes this month or whatever the case may be, that's going to allow us to go on this trip, or that's going to allow us to pay down this debt, so that they see the correlation between the hard work you're putting in, the results you're getting, and then how does that benefit everyone that's part of this family ecosystem. So I really like what you're saying there. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit back to, how can someone that maybe grew up in a household that maybe, again, didn't have a lot of money or had a negative connotation associated with money. I know when I was growing up, my parents did okay, middle class, no extravagant lifestyle, but we weren't broke.
Yeah.
But and this is no knock on my parents, a lot of people think this way, that it was always kind of like, well, if someone's rich, they've either screwed someone over to get there, or they did them, so they kind of lucked out, or they work all the time and the rest of their life is a mess. There's no true balance. That was like the only 3 options for getting rich, right? How does someone change that mindset to where it's okay to make a lot of money? You can kind of have your cake and eat it too. There might not be a full true balance, because that's almost impossible, but how do you change your mindset if you have a negative mindset towards wealth, where you think, wealthy people aren't the best people we should look up to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll use myself as an example. I love my parents, I love my family, I love my cousins, I love my aunts, uncles, so on and so forth. Something about my family, though, was very pessimistic. And, my dad would constantly say, "Hey, son, you think too big. Like, you really just, you just got to find a job that's going to pay bills, so on and so forth." And that would have been my battle. That was my fuel. And I love my dad dearly. But that would be my fuel, because I would want to prove him, in a sense, wrong. But separate for me and my personal experience, one of the ways to actually do that is to surround yourself with like-minded people. When you have people that are cheering you on, pushing you, moving you forward, hey, challenging you, why didn't you get this done? Because they're accomplishing the feats that you're wanting to get to. Well, it creates a new and different environment. I started with my family for a reason. And I'm going to go to this just for a smidge. I know there'll be a family member here and there, and it'll spread like wildfire, even as I mention this. but you have to start to put people on the outside of the circle sometimes if they're not in alignment with your thought process. And going back to my aunts, uncles, cousins, I had to basically disengage myself from 95% of my family because there was that constant resistance. So because of that, I started finding great people like yourself, great people like, Brian, great people like Loida, all of these people that basically we surround ourselves with that uplift and continue to encourage us versus the naysayers, because the naysayers, there's an abundance of that. They're a dime a dozen.
I love that. I love what you're saying, and it's so true. I remember even when I first got into real estate, I remember thinking to myself, all right, if I can make $100,000, I'm gonna be rich.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I went to a seminar, I think it was maybe a Mike Ferry seminar, I don't remember exactly what it was, but when I saw people on stage that were making 200, 300, 400, $1 million a year, that showed me what was possible, right? That these people were not superheroes. These were just your average, Joe Blows, the top areas, but they were doing these things that were, in my mind, extraordinary. And it showed me if they can do it, I can do it. So like you said, you got to put yourself in those circles, whether it's seminars or whether it's through coaching or preferably all of those things, mastermind. What do you do when maybe we're going through, let's say you've got the goals, you've worked on your mindset, you feel like you're heading in the right direction. Maybe you've had a good start to the year. Hopefully everyone has a good start to the year moving forward in 2025. But let's say something knocks you off course, whether it might be personal or maybe you just have a bad month in business and you get a lot of negative momentum heading your way. How can you quickly reverse that?
Well, it's not easy. That's the first thing. Is number one is you have to identify why you found yourself in that position. Okay, so I'm in this negative state. And the interesting thing about our business is that it's fairly predictable because you can almost always go back 90 days ago and say, man, I don't have any deals going on right now. And then you look back 90 days ago, you're like, oh, well, that was, 4th of July. I took half the month off. And then when I did get back, I was twiddling my thumbs for a little bit, perfecting my flyer, doing all of these things that I wasn't supposed to be doing. And then all of a sudden, we jump on the scale, which is that, of course, of reality. And we're like sitting there like, why am I having such a poor November? Why am I having such a poor December? Like, well, what's going on? And then we start to further buy into it. So number one, you have to be able to identify. Okay, you have to be able to identify as to when it happened and when you want it to stop. Okay. Now I know the second part of that, when you want it to stop, is because some people they linger in that negativity. I want it to stop now. Or you know what? I'm just going to give myself the rest of the year. Some people are actually okay with that. I'm not that kind of a person. So you have to make the decision, number one, as to when it started, number two, when you want it to stop. And then you have to start looking at who are the people that's going to help you, motivate you, push you. 95% of my coaching clients, unfortunately, fail at this. And what they fail at is the identifying the accountability. As an example, with me and you, what I would do is I'd say, hey, you know what, James, I'm not picking up the phone and calling people the way that I should. From now until the end of the year, let's make a commitment that you're going to call 5, I'm going to call 5, and then we're going to put $100 on the line for every day that you actually don't do with what you're supposed to be doing. And then you go through the rest of the year and you start to build that momentum back up. So you have to be able to, number one, going back to identify when it started. Number two, when you want it to stop. And then number three, start putting goals and plans in place that you can create accountabilities with.
Accountability is so crucial. And I love that you brought that up because I think, I was going to talk to you about another, of the mindset, but I think you tell me, I think accountability would help this as well. But we kind of, I'm talking, what I just asked you about was maybe we get some negative momentum. Maybe we start to get a little apathetic towards the business because we've hit the wall and we're getting maybe some negativity from clients, something, and you start to not like the industry, or, you kind of told us right there how to snap out of that. What if we're doing so well, we've got money in the bank, we've got a couple houses, a couple rental properties. Things are really going well. If you stopped working, you could pay your bills for the next 5 years and not, feel a hiccup.
Yeah.
We would probably say complacency is the next thing that sometimes sets in, right? So if someone is doing really well, but complacency starts to set in where you say, well, I'm doing pretty good, how do we snap out of that?
You got to get in a different pond. You got to get in a different pond. And what I mean by that is that you're now the biggest fish in that pond. And you are basically just that person that's like, I got everything. I'm cool. I'm driving the $150,000 car, or all my friends are driving the $80,000 car. I'm good. But then you put yourself in that next pond. In that next pond, you see the person that's actually driving the $350,000 car. You're living in the $750,000 home where they're living in the $3 million home. So you have to be able to surround yourself with people that are constantly looking to push you, motivate you, and get you to that next level. Because if you are the smartest person in the room, be careful. You're in the wrong room. Okay. Or maybe you're in the right room if you want to feed your ego. Okay. And you want to stay complacent. You don't want to dummy yourself down. But you have to constantly look at what role do you play in your circle.
That's a great point. So if you do find that you are getting a little too comfortable, you got to step into another room, or like you said, another pond, because you're probably the biggest fish. Yeah. I love that. I absolutely love that. So when it comes to maybe, I guess maybe to add to that, we're talking about goals earlier. Maybe the goals aren't big enough at that point, right? If your goal was to sell 40 homes and now you're hitting that consistently with ease, and you don't up the next level, something's wrong there, right? You got to up the goals, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes back to who you surround yourself with, because, and this is common, especially with realtors and in their office. They go and do 26 deals, and they're the number one agent in their office 9 times out of 10. The thing though is you have to expose yourself to different markets, different areas. I had the good fortune right out the gate where my broker challenged me, and he challenged me indirectly. And what I mean by that is I asked him when I first started, I said, hey, how do I get to be like that gal Joyce? And she goes, oh, hold on. Joyce has been in the business for 20 years, and doing 24 deals a year, that's a lot. Like, you got to be in the business a long time. And the very first thing I said, I'm going to figure out a way how to double that. And sure enough, that very first year, I didn't double it, but it was pretty close. I ended up doing 42 sides. And I used it as a challenge. So sometimes it's something that we can self-generate, and then other times you have to be able to put yourself in bigger arenas, because now you fast forward, now I am the number one agent, and then eventually going into a different company, again the number one agent in the number one office in all of all of LA County. Well, now I'm sitting here thinking, and I have complacency. So what do? I now join a different group where it's like, okay, I'm doing 150 deals a year, but that dude is doing 200. That dude is doing 250. She's doing 400 deals a year. They're making 4 million. That one's making 5 million. So now I have to constantly look at that next level.
And to get there, right, you had to probably go, like you said, outside even of your geographical area to say, hey, where's a mastermind? Where's a coaching program that has bigger players where I can learn more from, right?
Yeah. One thing I really am is super proud of is, for probably about a good 5, maybe 6 years, I would shadow agents, and I would travel. I'd get in a plane, I'd drive in a car, 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, and I would go and visit these people. Every single last person did more business than me, and I always looked, and I would educate myself on what they were doing that was different than I would. And sometimes I would sit there and say, man, this James dude, man, he is like on fire. Of course, he has great skills. He has an amazing schedule. He has all of this other stuff. And like, that's where I need to get to. And then I go to somewhere else, and I go like see, Nancy, and Nancy's doing 150 deals. And she's kind of like showing up at the office at 8:30, 9 o'clock, not well skilled, but she just was this, uberly successful person. And I'm like, I'm better than that. Why can't I have that? If I'm better skilled, if I'm more disciplined, if I'm so on and so forth. So I would use it as this constant level and guide and direction in terms of where I wanted to be and how I can actually become better and stronger than every single last person that I visited. And I would do that on a monthly basis. At least once a month, I would go and visit somebody to be able to open my eyes to other people that are successful.
That's so powerful that you say that. you know, you're right. There are more than one way to skin a cat, so to speak, right? You've got different personality types that are better at different things, and you can kind of pick and choose what will work best for you. But you can't do that if you're not getting around these different types of agents that are doing things at a high level.
Right.
A little bit, Robert, about, you know, we know, and we've been taught through, you know, different coaching programs and masterminds that you've got to put a little pressure on yourself sometimes, right? And maybe this is with the complacency part of things. You know, sometimes you got to go out and spend a little money, right? You got to empty the bank account. You've got to get another a car or something that puts a little pressure and say, hey, in order to afford this, I need to close another deal or two a month, and I'm going to put that pressure on myself. How do you balance that? And I'm curious your answer on this. And I know we're going to be coming up to the end of this pretty quickly, but how do you balance between putting pressure on yourself and maybe thinking bigger and extending yourself a little more in order to push yourself to do more? How do you balance that between, you know, where's the line between pushing yourself and then being just financially irresponsible?
Yeah, this is it's a great question, because ultimately this is a little bit of the challenge with most realtors. You know, they'll make $100,000 a year and they'll live a $200,000 lifestyle.
Yeah.
So it's a very fine question that I have to be careful with. So if you're in a position where you're starting to manage your money, you have 6 months worth of reserves, at least 6 months to 12 months, you're going to continue to push yourself. You're going to want to ideally do a version of money management. So in other words, every deal you close, you put 20% aside to this, 20% aside to that, 10 to here, 30 over there, so on and so forth. And what are the different accounts? Well, you got Uncle Sam you got to take care of. Realtors are notorious for not, you know, taking care of their taxes. So take care of your taxes, take care of Uncle Sam. You know, you have your personal expenses. What do you got to do to put food on your table, gas, so on and so forth? What about putting some savings aside? So once you start to do that and you have a little bit of the cushion, you can start to create these higher risk type of ventures. And now you're starting to go and get that extra car, that nicer car. Maybe you're upgrading from the $50,000 car to the $90,000 car. Maybe you're moving from the $400,000 home to the $800,000 home, but you're doing it within calculated risks. If you're the type of person that is constantly check to check to check to check, be careful with this approach, because you already have poor habits. You need to build the right habits first before you can actually even take that approach. And that goes back to the money management side of things.
That's a great point. Is to your point, you know, managing your money, making sure you understand, you know, you're setting aside money for investing, you're setting aside money for taxes and so on. And I think too, just to add to that, I agree with everything. Agents need to be careful not to extend themselves past what they personally feel that they can accomplish, right? And what I mean by that is, if you're confident enough in yourself, and I think, Robert, you kind of naturally had this, you had a natural drive to either say, hey, I'm going to happen, or I'm going to prove this person wrong. Some people have that, some people don't. But if you don't have that drive, and then on top of that, maybe the skill set to give you the confidence to push to the next level, then maybe don't go out and buy that car yet, right?
Yeah, let me give you an example, because it's easy for me to sit here and just give you guys just hot air. You put yourself in a position, let's say, for example, you want to upgrade your car. You're driving a really nice Honda Accord, nothing wrong with that. But all of a sudden you want to go and get a really nice BMW 5 Series. It's going to cost you 75 grand. And now that's going to be an $900 payment. You're used to the $400 payment, but you're trying to get to that $900 payment. What you do is you put $900 every single month, you put it into an account. When you reach X amount of dollars, which ideally is going to be about 5 months, 5 to 6 months, you set that money aside. You've now built the habit of being able to put that money aside. So now you have that money that's been set aside. You use it as part of your down payment, and you continue to just go in that direction. But if you're like, okay, 1 month I can do 900, the next month you can't do 900, the month after that you now do 900, the next month, and you just kind of do this back and forth. Well, now you're being financially irresponsible.
Brilliant. I think we're going to that, because that was brilliant, and I love that you're giving people actionable advice that they can take and say, okay, I understand what Robert's saying here. I'm gonna do that for my next car. Robert, anything you want to add before we end this, just in regards to put a bow on this whole millionaire mindset thing, especially moving into the new year?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is identifying this is the time of the year where you're going to start to put your business plan together, look at your goals for this next year, but you're also going to want to ask the question of yourself as to why. Why are you doing this? Why do you want to accomplish this? Okay, it's not, I'm not a big fan of knowing your why. It's a good phrase. I'm not knocking it for any perspective, but it's not a singular thing. It's more of a, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? I'll give everybody from a philosophical goodness, can't even speak. You guys get my point. I'm trying to say from a philosophical. As I'm trying to sound legitimate. Ask yourself this question. Okay, what is it you're wanting to accomplish this next year? Okay, well, I want to accomplish X. Okay, great. Well, could you live without it? Yeah, very likely. Okay. Now ask yourself the next question is, if I had only 90 days to live, would that goal still be the same? And 99% of the time, the answer to that question is no. Okay. In other words, I want to accomplish buying a new house. Okay. Well, good. That's a great goal. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you were to die in the next, I know it's kind of morbid, but if you were to die in the next 90 days, would that still be the same goal? Well, no, it would be different. My goal would actually be more of traveling, spending time with my family, the whatever. Well, then is that the right goal you're wanting to go after? Or should we start to look at goals that are going to be more specific to the secondary question? This is how you go from the surfacey type of goals to something that is more in depth, that is going to actually feed your soul and put you in a position where you're, of course, doing everything in your power. You no longer need an alarm at this point. You get up, you're excited, you want to go and conquer that and make that happen for yourself and or your family.
That's incredible. And you being in the business and the experience that you've had has brought you to that point in that realization, right? That, it is nice to have the nice cars. It is nice to have the nice house. But like you said, hey, if you weren't going to be here in 90 days, what would be the most important thing to you? And I think you're right, because people can do extraordinary things when they really identify why it is that they're doing what they're doing. So I think that's a perfect note to go out on.
Yep.
We're both at Real Brokerage. If people want to reach out and learn more, either about networking with you at Real Brokerage or maybe being personally coached by you, what should they do?
Yeah, just go on my handle, actually, the Robert Villanueva. I'm pretty much on every single last platform. Basically, you got Instagram, you got Facebook, you have YouTube, you have, what else? TikTok, Tinder, Christian Mingle, all of the above. So, yeah.
Well, this was probably my favorite so far. I know we're going to keep doing these every couple weeks, whenever we're doing this. I know you know the schedule better than I do, but this was probably my favorite so far, and I'm looking forward to the next one. Thank you, Robert, for your time as always.
Yeah, likewise. All right, everybody. Hopefully you guys got some value. I'll see you guys soon.
Take care.